Welcome to Tales, Tunes, and Tomfoolery starring Jerry Springer, along with Gene Galvin and me. I'm Megan Hills. We're recorded live in front of a brilliant studio audience at the Folk School Coffee Parlor in Ludlow, Kentucky.
My daddy came home.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's Jerry Springer.
Thank you. Oh. Every time you say that, I well up.
I know, it's so cute.
No, it's the cold. I got.
Hey, you know, Jerry.
So what's going on,
Well,
Gene?
it's kind of interesting that we start with this wonderful roots music, and
Yes.
that's the Red Cedars. Patrick Kennedy wrote that song. And it's funny, Saturday, I'm just out living my life, and I'm down at a place called Washington Park. It's sort of Cincinnati's version of Central Park.
It's a beautiful place.
It's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And there was this thing going on, this concert. It was a benefit concert. And all of these folk groups are streaming in to perform from 3 o'clock until probably 10 o'clock at night. I look over, and there's my friend Megan Hills walking up. It was a fundraiser, had to do with dogs, basically,
Yep, furry
friends.
friends.
And,
Yep.
and Megan was there with her dog, which she always says is part of her family. And we sat down, Jerry, and we listened to this music, and we were just a couple of regular human beings enjoying the
Among
afternoon.
the dogs.
Among the dogs. On the
Yeah.
grass.
And we were both joking, weren't we, Megan, that we
were.
didn't think that a Jerry Springer would ever come to anything
No,
like that.
he
Something that's that sort of normal.
Salt
and
of
just
the earth,
Salt
normal
of the earth.
Where did they have a place you could park the limos?
No,
they
see,
didn't.
that's the point. And that's actually my point.
Drivers didn't have a place to stand. It was,
Oh.
it was.
And we
really-
looked up and we saw, looked like to us, a corporate jet flying over, and we
Yeah.
thought, well, you know, maybe there's Jerry up there
There he
looking
is.
down.
I was flying
But
around.
sometimes you should go
Yeah.
out and just join regular people to just have fun in life. It
What
may-
are regular people like?
Well, right here.
Got a room full of them.
Hi, regular.
See, those are regular people.
Real people.
Now, I want to ask you something else
Yes.
that's in the same theme.
Yes.
And I want to show you this. And you might have to describe it because, of course, people, this is only audio, but this is a certificate that I received from the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Yes.
From January up to May,
Yeah.
I, Gene Galvin, served my state by serving on jury duty.
Well, that gets me nervous. What?
And I.
What do you mean, Joe? What? You got a certificate?
And I got
from
a
the-
certificate, and it's framed. I hang it on my wall, saying that, you know, thanking me for my service. It made
I
me
once
think
got
of
a certificate from the Justice Department.
Sure you
I bet
did.
you did. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, they invited me to come
Yeah.
on by.
Yeah, I bet they did.
And when I walked into the courtroom, they had this special seat for me.
That they did.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. So you served on a jury.
I did, and it made me wonder, have you ever, well, I thought two things. One, have you ever served on jury duty? I've been called twice. I served once.
Yeah.
I bet you have never, once again, done something that's helpful to your jurisdiction to go give 4
Community at
months of your
large.
life to sit and judge over other people. Another thought I had is, what the heck would people think if they looked up and they saw you on their jury?
that is the reason I never get selected for the jury.
Have you, and you've never been called?
Yeah, I have been called, but at various times. For example, when I was living here in Cincinnati, I started out being a lawyer, so I, normally wasn't called because I was in court representing people or whatever.
Right.
And then I was the mayor, so so there was never.
And by the way, you were a good lawyer because I remember.
So
you
anyway,
did, no,
so
no,
I
hold
was-
on, hold on.
Oh,
my
this
first
doesn't-
wife, Bonnie, sitting right there.
This
You
doesn't-
represented us.
That's how
in
I
a
met
situation
you. Well, no, actually.
with simply filing Megan a deed
Is this-
at the
this is
courthouse.
true?
This
is a
isn't
true story.
necessary.
And I would say about 12 years later, 15 years later, I was told, I got a call saying that
Yeah.
deed was improperly filed and it's all
Yeah.
messed up.
Well, thank you.
And the first
That I do believe. That is
That
very.
led to my current career.
Yes. That
Which
is
is
true,
what-
isn't
yeah.
it, Bonnie? That happened.
Oh,
And I
well,
remember
that-
I called you. I couldn't wait to call
Yeah.
Jerry to say.
Well, because you want a piece of property that slid down the hill.
Well, the
You
view of
moved
the
into a
river got
different
better and better
jurisdiction.
by the year.
It was
That
an
was
act of
actually a
God.
benefit.
It was an
Our
act
house
of
was
God.
getting closer to
Shall
the
we
river.
bow our heads?
Hey, anyway,
Yeah.
what the heck is the deal?
By the way,
that-
you never paid.
Oh.
Well,
You
fair
know, maybe
point.
you'd get better representation
Fair
if you
point.
paid.
Yeah, fair point.
Go ahead.
But why?
Why? But no,
so-
I do get called.
And then you don't serve. You don't get the certificate. You
Well,
don't serve your
they
state. It says it right
me.
there.
Like in Florida, for example. I mean, they do excuse me now because one, probably what they would perceive as influence, or people hate the show. They're going to go the other way. In other words, it just complicates the jury. So very rarely, having nothing to do with me, very rarely do you get people that are, for whatever the reason, well known necessarily sitting on a jury, because as a lawyer, you don't want to risk that. You don't want to risk that for your client,
Right.
because you're thinking you're going to, maybe this quote celebrity has influence on the other jurors, and that's not anything you want to play with. So most jury consultants will say you don't want that guy on the jury.
And Megan, this is one more time where the rich celebrities
Yeah.
have a real easy slide through life, and just working folks like us have
Plus,
to.
those chairs are not comfortable.
Though, I've never been
Oh
called up.
my God!
You have never been called?
No.
Yeah,
And
but
I would like to. I
My
wouldn't
people
mind it.
have served.
I'm sure.
Yeah, people have. Yeah. Well, I'm your people.
Yeah,
and
I was
I
gonna say,
serve.
clearly.
I
Jane's
have
been
my
sent.
people come down and serve.
Well, in closing,
and so you got this. This
I
is
did.
pretty sad.
everybody
that this is the only plaque.
that Gene Galvin has in his
71
room.
odd years
I did.
old.
And I'm
He's got
walking around
one
with a
plaque in
plaque.
his whole life.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
Speaking of plaques, today, this is true, and we're not going to talk about it, but this is God's truth. Today, exactly 50 years ago, I graduated from college.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank
Jerry.
you. I
Good
made
job.
it. And
Good
I got a plaque for that.
Yeah, I got a plaque.
I got a plaque, and it's bigger than that old
Yeah,
plaque.
I hear you.
Etched in stone.
Yeah, this is great. Isn't that pathetic to have this thing framed? I
It's
said to
very
my wife,
pathetic.
can you
This is-
frame that,
you are a
please? I got to have
lonely
this
man.
framed.
So
I am.
sad.
You need to
Hey,
get a life.
how about
Yes.
that Pete Rose?
Pete Rose. Oh, right, because the All Star Game is coming up here in Cincinnati. First of all, to have the All Star Game in Cincinnati, for Cincinnatians and the tri-state area, this is an amazing moment, because we probably deal with baseball differently than almost any other place in the country. Cincinnati was the first professional baseball team in America. And so we have always taken our baseball very seriously. And then during the 1970s, of course, we had the Big Red Machine. And there are those baseball aficionados who honestly believe that in the years 75 and 76, the team that the Reds had was perhaps the greatest team ever assembled for 1 or 2 years. That and the 27 Yankees, and there's always a discussion about that. But it was a great team. And on that team, you had people that either are in the Hall of Fame or should be in the Hall of Fame, and that's what we'll talk about in a second. But you had Pete Rose, you had Johnny Bench, you had Joe Morgan, Tony Perez. I mean, it was an incredible team, and won the World Series in 75 and 76. Okay, the reason it's such a big deal this year to have it back is Pete Rose is, in a sense, Cincinnati. And what I mean by that is, in today's world, we tend, as fans, to root for uniforms. In other words, you say you're a fan of the Cincinnati Reds or the LA Dodgers or the New York Yankees, but the truth is you're rooting for that uniform because the players don't live there. They're not from there. They probably play there only for a few years before they take a better contract or get traded to another team. Players have no connection to the franchise they play for. That's what happened when free agency came around. But there was a time before 1976 when ball players really lived in the community they played for, and they usually spent most, if not all, of their career with that one team. You add to that the fact that Pete Rose was born in Cincinnati, schooled in Cincinnati, Western Hills High School. It was a very unique experience for those of us who lived here to actually see someone on September 11th, 1985, when he got his 4,192nd hit, passing Ty Cobb, to have gotten the most hits ever in the history of baseball, that we saw it here in our hometown from someone who we lived with our whole lives, who was born and raised here. So you saw the development of this kid being a high school star and then going on to play minor league ball, and then he played for the Reds his whole career. It was like, you don't get that experience to find someone who is the best in the world at something and you saw the whole development. That is a very unique experience. Frankly, I can't think of anyone else, the very best person who ever lived at that thing, and yet you saw his whole life. So Cincinnati's relationship with Pete Rose is beyond what most communities have for their favorite athletes. Now, of course, you know the end of that story, or at least the middle of that story. Pete Rose gets found to have gambled on baseball, which is the cardinal rule of baseball that everyone who plays the game is told from day one during spring training. There's a big statement about it in the dressing room saying you may not bet on baseball. Everyone knows that rule. And the reason that is the fundamental rule of baseball is that baseball almost was done away with in 1919 because players had bet on the game. The famous Black Sox scandal. No one will go to baseball games or any sporting event if they believe the players are betting on it, because then none of it is honest. None of it is true. You don't know if a basketball player is purposely missing a shot because he's bet on the other team winning. You don't know if a baseball player is striking out or dropping a ball or throwing it errantly into the stands because he's got some money on the game. You can't have sports, and you certainly can't have professional sports when all this money is put into it, if there is even a hint that there's gambling going on in the sport among the players that are participating. It is why it is the most sacred rule of all. So, Pete Rose, one of the greatest players ever, who legitimately got more hits than anybody else, and who by any standard would be in the Hall of Fame. No one got more hits than him ever, and no one will ever come close because careers aren't that long anymore. But he's not in because he gambled on baseball. And there are people that say, wait a second, there are people in the Hall of Fame who did far worse things in terms of life, who committed violent crimes, some suspected even of murder, rape, all kinds of horrible, horrible crimes. And they're in the Hall of Fame. We don't judge them, their personal lives, or what they did. We only judge by what you did on the field. And yet, for Pete Rose, they made an exception because this hit at the very heart of the sport. Now, the technicalities are such that in 1990, they passed a new rule. You can't be voted into the Hall of Fame unless you're eligible to be in the sport of baseball. And so when Pete Rose was banned for life, which was the punishment for having bet on baseball, he couldn't be voted into the Hall of Fame because he's banned from baseball. It is now 25 years later, and more of us are saying, you know, he served his time. 25 years. His career was stopped. It's not as if baseball would be going back on its punishment. They threw him out of baseball, and they kept him out of baseball, participating in it, for the rest of his life. So there's nothing that baseball has to say, oh, we're giving in. No, the rule is still there. You bet on baseball, you will be banned from participating in it for, let's say, at least the next 25 years. Well, if you're banned from participating in baseball for 25 years, your career's over. No one's going to hire you at that age to either play or do anything else. So it's a career ender anyway. So the only question is now whether this guy who lives and breathes baseball, who has been, other than the gambling, a great ambassador for the game. He just, if you know Pete, it just oozes out of him. Anytime he's got a microphone in front of him, he talks about the love of the game. He still knows probably more about baseball than any person living. So maybe now, after 25 years, with the All Star Game coming to Cincinnati and a new commissioner who said he will revisit the issue and even meet with Pete, can you imagine if they used that night to announce that Pete Rose is no longer banned from baseball?
And that's what you're calling for? That's what you're hoping
I think
for?
that would be such a wonderful moment. It is part of the forgiveness that is in the American spirit. It is still consistent with the strictness of the rule. You are banned from baseball for the rest of your career. And now it would give the Hall of Fame the opportunity to vote for him. The other technical problem is you only can get voted into the Hall of Fame, I think, 15 years or so after you become eligible. You become eligible for the Hall of Fame after you've been out of the game for 5 years. Then there's a 15-year period they can vote you in. If you don't get voted in over those 15 years, and obviously the 15 years has passed, then only a Veterans Committee can vote you in. And that Veterans Committee is made up of other Hall of Famers. Now, I personally think that sucks. Because there's just something elitist by the idea that because you're in the Hall of Fame, you have a say as to who else gets in.
And you think the prospects in front of that group would be much tougher for
It's
him?
a tougher haul. It's not hopeless, but it's a tougher haul. But at least let baseball take the step of saying a man who has devoted his life to the game here in Cincinnati, the nation watching the All Star Game, wouldn't it be great to say, you know what, Pete, come on in. You're back.
That's good. Good thoughts, Jerry.
Cincinnati would explode. It would explode.
And Pete, if you're listening, I could use 2 tickets to the game.
No one can get tickets.
Because God knows he's gotten tickets for your TV show, hasn't he, over the years?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He is someone who would watch.
Let's analyze for a second. yeah, that's right.
That's
And I mean that in only the finest way.
That was a bit judgy.
Yeah.
Let's try this for a segue. Let's see if coal companies are gambling with the environmental health of Kentucky's future.
Wow.
And to
What a
do that,
transition.
yeah. And
That was
to
rich.
discuss that, we have Rick Troud, who is with us. Thank you for coming, Rick. And Rick is a member of Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. And we're going to talk for a couple minutes about mountaintop removal. And maybe the best way to start is for you first to tell us just a sentence or two about the Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. And then also, what's mountaintop removal? Because some listeners may not know that term, that way of framing the issue.
Well, Kentuckians for the Commonwealth began actually in the coal fields in eastern Kentucky as a response to mountaintop removal mining. We have a broader scope right now than just environmental issues. But as far as mountaintop removal, what's happening, and I need to go back a little background here, what's happened in the coal fields of Kentucky, they've been mining coal in Kentucky for over 100 years. All the coal that's easy to get at is gone. There's probably 3.3 billion, that's a B, tons of coal left in what's called the Pool Creek coal zone, which is eastern Kentucky. But the report also says that it's thinner seams, it's deeper, and it's going to be much more expensive to get this out of the ground. Mountaintop removal is an inexpensive way to get the thin seams out of the ground if they're close to the surface. I've heard people call it bombing the mountain, but they're massive explosions which basically blow the top off the mountain.
Really?
Yes, and then they bring in large earth-moving equipment which shove the refuse off and down into the valleys below. What runs through the valleys? Streams. And whenever you have coal, you have sulfur, you have arsenic, you have mercury, you have selenium. All this stuff will pollute the stream.
And not only affect, therefore, the wildlife and the environment, but also the people that live in these communities.
Exactly.
Their water is now affected.
Yes. And the thing is, you got to remember, in these, we're talking these mountain hollers, mountain valleys. There's not city water. So they're getting their water out of a well, mostly out of a well. There's a great story on our website, and I would suggest anyone here who wants to read it. It's about a man named Rick Hanshoe from Floyd County and what happened when they put one of these surface mines on the mountain behind his house, poisoned his lakes, poisoned the stream. His family's been living on this Raccoon Creek for over 200 years. They've had to abandon their homestead.
Is anyone doing studies on the effects of the health of the people that live there? In other words, have the cancer rates incrates?
There are, yes. Yes,
Yeah, so we have those.
There is definite evidence.
There is empirical
You have
evidence.
respiratory problems. You have higher cancer rates. You have higher rates of various diseases in these communities.
3 things, it sounds like, happen that many would say are very disdainful. And I just came back from a backpacking trip a month ago, Pine Ridge Mountain down near Harlan and Whitesburg and in the same region. And I did it in the spring when the leaves weren't up yet. Part of the wonderful experience is to look up and to see the beautiful ridges. It's sort of play out in front of you. Now you see flat tops, a horribly unnatural look. So the one thing is they just lop the mountain off so it looks different. Two, all the residuals go down into the valleys and pollute. And then third is this potential health problem.
We had, about a year ago, we had 2 members of a local Libertarian Party show up at one of our meetings. And they were all hot on this issue for something I had never thought of, and that's property rights. When they come in and they do this, they destroy the value of the surrounding properties. And they were coming at this from an environmental standpoint, but from a property. So there's a number of aspects to this whole thing.
By the way, there's a book, and you read it, we talked about it.
Yeah, John
So talk about
Grisham's
that.
book, Gray Mountain, which I think is if it's not his most recent one, it's within the last 2 that he's put out. And it's exactly on this issue and of knocking off the mountaintops and what it has done to the local community and the increase in all kinds of diseases and the loss of property. And now this is in the novel, the callousness of, if the coal company can make some money with this, they're going to go ahead and do it. As you said, it's a cheaper way to get coal. What about when we were digging in the coal mines? Of course, that was a very difficult existence for the coal miners. And, talk about lack of safety and going in there and the
Black lung disease,
and all of that was going on. So there will be those that argue, if you're going to have coal, is this environmentally a better way? In other words, what is the human effect of knocking off the tops of mountains versus going deep into the coal mines?
Well, I think you've got more people affected by mountaintop removal.
Got it.
Because, number one, when the poison, when the arsenic and the mercury and all these nasty things hit the water, everybody downstream is impacted. And that stream is going to flow into a bigger stream. It's going to flow into a bigger stream. Pretty soon it's going to be into a river.
Were these coal miners that used to be in the mines, are they the ones now working on this, or did they hire different people?
No, it's some of the same people, but that's an older generation.
Right.
What also do you say about the economic arguments that the coal companies make, and a lot of Kentucky and West Virginia and Pennsylvania, places where they make the argument to groups like yours, you guys are causing real trouble because this is our economy. Coal is king in Kentucky, and you come in and turn people away from our economy and hurt our workers in these communities we named before. So what's the answer to the economic question?
A couple of things. One, the number of miners, active miners in the Appalachian coal fields is going down dramatically year to year to year to year. So the problem is coal. We've gotten at all the easy stuff. It's going to be expensive, if we can't do mountaintop removal to get to the others. But even with mountaintop removal now, coal right now is more expensive per BTU than natural gas. So you've got things like the utility in Big Sandy announcing, this is the middle of coal fields, announcing they're going to convert to natural gas.
The whole fracking question comes up then.
Well, but for talking just economics right now, and you're right, there are certainly environmental issues associated with the fracking and all the sea of natural gas that we have. One of the local politicians called the CEO an idiot. And there was this big brouhaha, so they backed off and they said, okay, and then they filed a rate increase because it's going to cost more to burn the coal. Well, then everybody blows up about that. I mean, you're damned if you're doing, you're damned if you don't. These jobs are going to go away. And right now in the United States, there are more people working in the solar energy field than there are in the coal mines.
That's right. And
that's
by
the
the way, they
direction.
went through the same thing with tobacco, which sadly was Kentucky as well as North Carolina, et cetera. But the big tobacco states, as obviously we learned, the ills and the dangers of smoking, all of a sudden that industry, people had to move on to other
things.
That is inevitable. As times change and we become more educated, people move into different fields. So no parent is talking to his young son or daughter right now and saying, hey, when you graduate, I want you to go into the coal mines. I want you to go into the coal industry.
There's other things Kentucky can be doing having to do with tourism and borrowing some things from North Carolina and Tennessee.
There's one thing Kentucky has done which is just dreadful. West Virginia, which has all the same problems, the coal severance tax, which is money earmarked for just this situation when the coal runs out. What's going to happen? West Virginia has been doing what they were supposed to do with it and stockpiling it. They have billions of dollars in this fund that they can use to help bring other industries in, to retrain the
And
people.
Kentucky doesn't do that, you say?
What Kentucky did was started putting all that money into the general fund. We have nothing.
That's interesting. All right, thank you very much, Rick Stroud,
you go.
Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. It's an important issue, not just to this place where we sit at the Folk School Coffee Parlor, which is in Ludlow, Kentucky, but it's important to certainly a whole region. And another time, we'll always go back to talk about the environment. It's an ongoing discussion, climate change, et cetera, because that all has to do with fossil fuels.
I mean, we
burning fossil fuels.
ultimately, we have to get away from it.
So now we're going to
Can I make
switch.
one last
Yes.
thing? Yesterday, June 1st, and I think anybody here who's a fan of mountain music, Gene Ritchie died, age 92.
Yep.
I mean, just
She
an
was
amazing
wonderful.
woman.
I appreciate your bringing that up, and let's now talk some music. We have a group that I love, and it's called the Mamadrones.
I love
and,
I love you more.
And
He lies.
in the Mamadrones are, and I want to kind of highlight this, is Maria Corelli, who is one of the baristas here.
Yes.
And we love Maria.
Serving us.
And then also Annie and she's on guitar, and Andy McFeeters, who plays mandolin on this tune, and Jonathan Dahl, who plays bass. And Maria, and maybe others too, I didn't get ages, but I know, because I've asked you, like, how old are you? And you 23 when I asked you that. Maybe you still are 23. And
So
that
three
puts
of
her,
them, two of whom were dolls.
yeah. And so,
His
yeah,
last
hey.
name
Oh
is
my
Doll.
God.
Okay, I'll be here all week.
But don't
Good
Right.
Lord.
And Maria and she and maybe her cohorts are original songwriters, are writing their own music. And this song called Trouble, which has an interesting story. Let's hear the song, and then we'd like to chat with you about it. Sure thing. The Mamadrones.
Heat is rising, crime is thriving. In this time, there's hell to pay. Mama's working, daddy's drinking, baby's cries won't go away. Choose on, choose on, choose on, choose on this world. Rising water, muddy water, it's enough to make you proud. Get this devil off my back, Lord. He's been leading me astray. Choose on, choose on, choose on this way. Now choose on, choose on, choose on, choose on this way. Wind was breaking, fires raging, turning everything to ash. There's a cross out in the meadow, and it's burned right through to black. Choose on, choose on, choose on, choose on this way. Now choose on, choose on, choose on, choose on this way. Losing sideways, money's tight. People don't know their own house. Petty ganker and big dog banker. Now's a game of cat and mouse. Choose on, choose on, choose on, choose on this way. Now choose on, choose on, choose on, choose on this way. Choose on, choose on, choose on, choose on this way. Choose on, choose on, choose on, choose on.
That's a great song. I have to admit,
Yeah.
I requested that song because I hang out here all the time. Maria can attest to that. They get sick of seeing me. And one conversation we had was, or I heard you sing that on one Saturday morning, and I asked about it. And Maria, by the way, who wrote that song, is an environmental studies graduate of the University of Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So it's perfect fit to have her here the same night we're talking about Kentuckians for the Commonwealth.
Tuesday of every month.
All right.
And I asked you one day, what's that song? Where did you get that song? What was the inspiration for that song? And please tell that story real fast.
Well, so I say this sometimes when I start this song. I like to hear the background of people's songs, so I like to give my background sometimes. And this one, I went to college for 4 years, got my bachelor's of science, as you said, in environmental studies, and took some amazing classes there, some incredible professors, and lots of information out there on this stuff. And it's a new and budding major, just because there's all this, all this stuff going on with the environment and the anthropogenic effects on it, so human effects on it. And so I learned all these, I had there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and essentially what I took away from all that was we're all doomed.
Yeah.
I
love that.
And so,
Of course I'm joking, but
Sorry, Mom and Dad, for all the money you paid.
so before the lights go out,
Let's sing Irene goodnight. Yeah.
this is a perfect segue into Irene Goodnight, because it's all over, folks.
Hey, Maria, that dark view is kind of frightening, because it is spawned by all of these issues, that one of which we were talking about tonight. And it's understandable, and I know you have this philosophy, we're not giving up. No. This environment is worthy of being fought for, and we'll fight for it in our ways that we know how, including your music, and that song helps do that. We appreciate it very much. Would you guys take us out on Irene Goodnight, the song that we always go out on, and we always look forward to hear what pace you're going to play it in, what key, to see if Jerry Springer can find that key, because he's going to join in on this.
It almost doesn't matter what key you play it in, 'cause I sing in my key, which is L sharp.
Irene, God knows I do love her till the river runs dry. But if she ever takes to another, I'm gonna take morphine and die. Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams.
Sometimes I live in the country, sometimes I live in town. Sometimes I take a great notion to jump in the river and drown.
Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams.
Well, I asked your mother for you. She said that you was too young. Now I wish that I'd never seen your face, and I'm sorry that you were ever born.
You've been listening to Tales, Tunes, and Tomfoolery, sponsored by the Folk School Coffee Parlor in Ludlow, Kentucky. Thanks to Patrick Kennedy for writing our opening song, and to you for listening. Hope to see y'all again real soon.